Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. People ask me all the time, what was the best battleship? And that is a very loaded question. For today's video, we're going to go through and look at what was the best battleship each year of the Dreadnought era. Because people don't necessarily agree on what was the best battleship of all times, but when you look at the best battleship in any given year, like what was the best battleship in 1906? HMS Dreadnought. She was the only Dreadnought-type battleship out there. And then you see a lot of change as each new class gradually takes that title. Now, we're not going to go through and talk about the commissioning dates of every single battleship out there. So if we're just looking at the battleships that were commissioned in a given year. So, for example, the Brazilian battleship Minas Gerais was the best battleship in the world for a couple of months until the next battleship was put into commission. We're not going to look at that. What was the best battleship in commission on the last day of that year? And so we're going to go through by year and see just how long some of these battleships held that title of best in the world before another one supplanted it. What is the rate of growth of these battleships? So we already talked about 1906's HMS Dreadnought. All pre-Dreadnought battleships have now become obsolete, which not only includes the battleships then in commission, but also most major navies have some of their best pre-Dreadnoughts still under construction. Those ships will not enter service until 1907, 1908, 1909, 1910 even, well into the Dreadnought era. And they have to finish these ships before they can get authorization and money for new ships, and before they have slipway spaces for building those new ships. So Dreadnought is the best battleship in the world for about 3 years. In 1908, the battlecruiser Indomitable is built. And this is where it's worth talking about my considerations for the best. I tend to rate firepower as the #1 criteria for being the best battleship, armor for #2, and speed for #3. There's very few instances on here where battle cruisers make the list. They tend to have to attain a much higher speed to get that advantage to be the best battleship type vessel in the world. So even though Indomitable was commissioned in 1908 as the second Dreadnought type warship out there, I still have HMS Dreadnought as the best battleship at that time. She's not supplanted until 1909 when the Billy Ruffian comes along. The Bellerophon class battleships were a slight improvement over the Dreadnought class. They waited a couple years to commission the next one of them. They didn't build them nearly as quick as Dreadnought to learn operational experience from Dreadnought and to get some information on what other countries would build in response to Dreadnought. One of the interesting things you see as you go through this list is I'm only going to name battleships from a very small number of countries. While 13 nations operated Dreadnought-type battleships or battle cruisers, only 3 or 4 seem to actually be competing in the arms race that is escalating the size of battleships. So for example, France, Germany, Russia, they are laying down battleships, but they're not trying to build something bigger and better than what everyone else has. They tend to be comparable to the other types of battleships being laid down at that time. And oftentimes it takes them even longer to build their ships than countries like the United States or Great Britain, which means that by the time they're commissioned, and I'm looking specifically at the commissioning dates here, they have no chance of being the best battleship in the world because another country, usually Japan, the United States, or Great Britain, has escalated what is going to be the best battleship in the world. So in 1910, I have the American Dreadnought Delaware as the best battleship in the world. Great Britain still has the most battleships, but they have guns in wing positions, much like German battleships of this time, the Japanese battleships like Setsu, the semi-dreadnoughts. So they are not able to bring their full broadsides to bear. But Delaware has all 5 of her twin 12-inch turrets on centerline, and so has the best broadside of any battleship at the time. The Delaware class is succeeded in 1911 by the Florida class, which is only a moderate improvement over them. So I have those ships as the best in the world, 1910, 1911. 1912, the Empire strikes back. Great Britain commissions the first super dreadnoughts. And they don't just commission a super dreadnought, they commission the Orion-class super dreadnoughts, the Lion-class super dreadnought battlecruisers, and the King George V class super dreadnoughts. So, I've got King George V as the best battleship in the world in 1912. These new battleships are all armed with 8 or 10 13.5-inch guns and heavier armor than preceding standard type dreadnoughts. 1913, Japan takes the prize for the first time with the commissioning of the battlecruiser Congo. This is one of the few instances of battlecruiser making on the list. Congo has 8 14-inch guns. She has reasonable armor protection and a really high speed. And so she's a little bit better than the other super dreadnoughts that have come out to this point. In the next year, we have another generation of super dreadnoughts, the American New York class, the British Tiger, which is very much a modified Lion to be more on par with Congo, and the Iron Duke. I'm going to take New York as the best in the world at this time because she has 10 14-inch guns, not 10 13.5 like Iron Duke, or 8 14 or 8 13.5 like Congo and Tiger, respectively. So in 1914, New York is the best in the world. 1915, Queen Elizabeth comes onto the scene. And this is not only a super dreadnought battleship armed with 15-inch guns, armored against 15-inch guns, it is also a fast battleship. These are somewhere in speed between the battle cruisers and the battleships. And so they are a better combination of speed, armor, and firepower than any other ship in the world. And they're going to retain that title for a while, because the next year, the Germans commission Bayern, and the United States commissions the Nevadas and the Pennsylvanias, which use the all-or-nothing armor scheme. And while these are great, the 15-inch guns of the Queen Elizabeths, combined with their speed, is what's going to keep them at the top of my list all the way up through the end of World War I. And they hold that title until 1919. In 1920, we get 2 new fast battleships commissioned, those being HMS Hood and the Japanese battleship Nagato. Nagato has 8 16-inch guns, Hood has 8 15-inch guns. Hood has the faster high speed at 30 knots, and both ships surprisingly have very comparable armor. Nagato has slightly better deck armor, but otherwise it's relatively similar across the board. So I have Nagato as the best battleship in the world starting in 1920. 1921, the United States commissions its answer, USS Maryland, a Colorado-class battleship, also with 16-inch guns. But I still have Nagato as the better ship because of her speed. In 1922, the Washington Naval Treaty basically stops new ship construction, and a couple ships like Mutsu, another Nagato-class battleship, and West Virginia and Colorado are going to be commissioned. But that's it. What you have is what you get. So I have Nagato still as the best battleship in the world. In 1927, we get the first new battleship commissioned since 1922, and that is HMS Nelson. She's armed with 9 16-inch guns, so better firepower than Nagato, nominally. Nagato has 8 16.1-inch guns. But the Nelrods have trouble with their 16-inch guns for a while. They don't quite operate properly. While they probably have better armor than any other battleship in the world at this time, their speed is abysmal. It's on par with other dreadnought-type battleships. And so I still have Nagato coming out on top. As we get into the 1930s, we start to see other new construction, like the French battleship Dunkirk in 1936, or the German battleship Gneisenau in 1938. Both of these have smaller caliber guns, 13 inches for Dunkirk, 11 inches for Scharnhorst. So I still have Nagato as the best battleship in the world until 1940. 1939 is our last year as the best battleship in the world. At this point, the Queen Elizabeths have been the best in the world for 5 years, Dreadnought for 3 years, Nagato for 20 years, and a couple other ships for 1. In 1940, we have 2 treaty-type battleships. In 1940, we have 2 treaty-type fast battleships commissioned, Richelieu and Bismarck, each armed with 8 15-inch guns, each with 30 knots of speed, and each with pretty robust armor schemes. While I like Richelieu as the better ship in this matchup, I'm going to give 1940 to Bismarck. Richelieu was really rushed into commissioning and was not ready to go yet in 1940. I think in 1940, Bismarck would win a fight between those 2 ships. In 1941, you get the commissioning of North Carolina, armed with 9 16-inch guns. I'm still going to have Bismarck as the top battleship at this point. North Carolina really isn't fully operational until 1942. So Bismarck is the top battleship at least until May of 41, when she's absolutely obliterated. But on a ship-for-ship basis, best battleship in the world at that time. The end of 1941, we have the battleship Yamato entering commissioning. So definitely from 1942 till 1945, Yamato is the best battleship in the world. She is sunk in 1945, however, which means in 1946, you've got the option for either the Iowa-class battleships or HMS Vanguard, which is commissioned. The Iowas are faster and have better main battery guns. Vanguard arguably has better armor protection. So I'm going to give it to the Iowa-class. At least one Iowa-class battleship remains in commission from 1946 all the way up until 1958. And so the Iowa-class retains that title throughout that whole time period. For a brief period at the end of 1958, the best battleship in the world is the Almirante La Torre, which is the Chilean super dreadnought. In mid-1958, the last of the Iowas is decommissioned. It's not until late 1958 that Almirante La Torre is decommissioned. By this time, all of the French battleships, all of the British battleships, all of the Russian battleships, all of the Argentinian and Brazilian battleships, and all the Turkish battleships have already been decommissioned. All of the French, German, and Italian battleships have already been sunk. So, the Iowas are the best up until 1958. There's a brief couple-month window where Almirante La Torre is being decommissioned. And then 1968, 1969, New Jersey is the only battleship in the world. There were no battleships anywhere active as battleships. There are a couple being used as training ships or barrack ships or in mothballs, but essentially from 1958 until 1968. New Jersey gets 68, 69. New Jersey gets 82, 83. Then we bring Iowa back, and it is the Iowa class until 91. And then Wisconsin and Missouri are the last ones in 92. And so, at the end of the day, our best battleship ever, the Iowa class spends 26 years holding that title. The Nagato class, 20 years. The Queen Elizabeth class, 5 years. Bismarck, debatably for 2 years. I'm still not convinced by that. And Dreadnought for 3 years. And then a couple other ships for 1 year each. So, does my ranking of the best battleship in the world meet your criteria? Let us know in the comment section down below if you think that another battleship should be the best in a given year. I'd love to hear if you agree with my grading metric for these ships, or if you think that other ships should hold that title instead. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. Really appreciate your support. There's a link in the description below if you'd like to donate to support the museum. You can also support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find about us and our channel. Thanks for watching.